Hello and welcome for this last release of the year. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year very soon. This is Xen Orchestra 5.90, and we'll explore today all the details about this new release. But now, as usual, as we do many times in 2023, we'll have an overview on the project and community. We'll scroll down to what's up in this area, and we'll start with new bundles. So, as you may know, we are now focusing on providing our stack into a bundle. So it's kind of a pivotal moment for us where we are working on creating a commercial offer that is basically bundling, as the name, all our previous offers into one single, I would say, stack, but also commercial offer. So you could read the detail on the blogs. We'll provide maybe at some point a video to explain all the details, but I wanted to use the opportunity of this release to give you a hint about it. And it's very interesting. We made a lot of effort to craft those plans. That will be, I would say, really interesting, even from small infrastructure to medium infrastructure. To be fair, more fair than what we had before with Xen Orchestra, that was flat priced. So take a look and see if it fits for your use case. We'll be happy to discuss further with you if you have any question. Moving on news that is related to XCP-ng, but more specifically the guest tools that we decided to kind of reboot and rewrote them from Go to Rust. And we made a release that was, I would say, not a final one, but 0.30 release. And we made a lot of progress to be fully compatible with Linux, but also BSDs, like FreeBSD and so on. And we made a Debian repository available directly. So if you want to test it, go ahead. It works pretty well. And you can report already all the VM data you have, like IP addresses and so on. And it's very, very fast. So take a look on the blog post and please try. We got also a forum post where you could, give some input. So next is the new ISO for XCP-ng 8.2.1. So it's not a new release per se, but it's a new ISO that we regenerated. And this new ISO contains all our security updates since almost 2 years ago. So that's very convenient to get a fresh install with this new ISO with all the updates included, but also better hardware support and drivers. So if you play with recent Intel NUCs or let's say, kind of home labbers hardware, then it's better supported than before, thanks to this ISO. So that's pretty cool. And finally, let's move on to the Xen Orchestra release by itself. So it was, let's say, the side projects we have, but let's focus now on Xen Orchestra. And as we open in general, we are opening with the backup category. So this month, what do we have for the backup? So the first thing we added is if you enable NBD backups. So as a reminder, NBD backups are another way to export your VMs. And those NBD backups are faster, but also using less resources on your dump zero. So it's a double win. And we started to make it, easier and easier. And this month we decided to also create a task inside the XCP-ng host so you could track the progress of your backup. Because before that, when we did a backup with a normal, I would say, legacy VHD export, we had a task automatically generated by XCP-ng. But with NBD, it wasn't the case. So we, let's say, develop something into Xen Orchestra that will create the task directly into the host. So now you can track the progress of your NBD enabled backup. And there's a screenshot just on the bottom that could show you exactly what it looked like. So it's basically like a regular task, but then you didn't have that before. And so it's there. So if you want to try NBD, now you could even, know what's going on and where we are in the transfer. Another cool perk with NBD is also optimizing the backup performance on high latency links. So let me give you some example. So yeah, NBD is really nice. You can do many things with it, among like pause, resume downloads, especially when you lose the internet connection. So this is already implemented. You could seek into any position within the blocks. You could download data blocks in different manner than you can't with the VHD. And finally, you could download those blocks in parallel. And why it's important? So let's see the first graph, which is showing the impact on the backup speed with one thing downloaded. So on this first graph, what you can see is the backup speed is really, let's say, destroyed by the latency of your backup repository. So for example, if you have a very, let's say, close backup repository or remote, then the backup speed is pretty high, like, 250 megabyte per second, so it's pretty fast. But as soon as you got a backup repository which is only 10 millisecond away, then you are going down a lot, and it's uh, worse and worse as the latency is going up. That's when you do whatever NBD or VHD backup. The both are having the same behavior, but if you use parallel multiple block at the same time downloaded, then as you can see, it completely erases the problem of latency for the 10 millisecond thing. So in deep blue, you have the one block per block download, and in red you have the speed if you use 8 blocks in parallel. And as you can see, without any latency, the result is the same. But as soon as you get, for example, 10 millisecond latency, you almost keep the same speed than if you have no latency. And even in very, very, let's say, high latency backup repository network between XO and the place where you store the backup, it's still usable, and it wasn't before that. So the extreme example is a 50 millisecond example, where you are currently at around 10 megabytes, and with the new 8 block per transfer, it's 80. So as you can see, it's really huge, and even having let's say 20 millisecond backup repository is acceptable. So it's a great step forward to be able to distribute your backup infrastructure between multiple places that are not close to each other. Obviously, if you are going beyond 50 millisecond latency, our advice is that it's probably better to, let's say, backup locally and then use a mirror backup feature, allowing you to kind of replicate that backup to another place that is far away, but in an async manner. So you won't have any backup speed impacts on your production, which is great. So, but anyway, before those 50 milliseconds, it drastically improved the speed of the backup. You can configure that. Let's scroll down on the last screenshots of this paragraph, where you could enable NBD if you check the thing, and then you put the number of NBD connection per disk. It could be, one, which is the current one, but up to 8, or I mean, your mileage may vary. It depends on, the compute, let's say, amount of compute you might have, the network, and many other things. So it really depends, but 8 is a good example on how it could really speed up if you have a high latency. So you could try at 8, maybe 4. Again, depends, but feel free to try and report if you have some feedback. The next step on backup is not something we actually released, but this is something we are working on. So it's a big wall of text, but I will kind of recap it in few words. We are working on immutability, but on-prem immutability. So on-prem mean you can already have immutability if you use S3 backup toward, I don't know, AWS or whatever. This will brings you the ability to trigger object lock with a policy and say, for example, in your AWS console or whatever S3 console, for how long a file, before how long a file could be removed. And you can configure this, and then Xen Orchestra won't be aware about that, but just do the backup. And this is really helpful because if Xen Orchestra want to remove those files because you have the object lock, it won't be able to. So it just requires some, being smart between the XO retention and the object lock policy, but it works already. But what we wanted to do is to allow that on-prem. So it means that we are working on giving you a piece of software that you will install on your backup repository, like, I don't know, Debian with NFS or whatever, a small daemon that will make that kind of object lock thing, but even with NFS, for example. And Xen Orchestra won't be able to remove the files, only the daemon that you are running into root on your backup repository will be able to do that. So this is what we call governance mode. Um, because if you have root access to your machine, then it's governance mode. So governance means I this is the settings I'm doing it, and if Xen Orchestra is compromised, it won't be able to compromise the backup repository. The other mode is compliance, but compliance means you have no way to remove a backup even if you are root, which is not possible on-prem, obviously. But if at some point we want to provide an S3 service directly integrated in the cloud for you in Xen Orchestra, you could probably have this kind of compliance mode. So anyway, this is governance mode, immutability on-prem. We're working on it. Expect at least the first prototype to be there in Q1 of 2024. So very exciting to get that online, because this means even if you have the worst ransomware or hacker got access to your Xen Orchestra, it won't be able to remove all of those backups. So that's pretty great. Let's move on to the next feature, which is called scoped tags. So what is a scope tag? So we already have the tags available in the UI of Xen Orchestra, but frankly, we got the inspiration from GitLab, which is already providing this. Yeah, I think it's called scope labels, something like this. So the idea is, okay, a label is good, but sometimes there's a context with this tag or this label. So maybe we want to provide a context for it. And now if you enter, for example, prod equal database, this will transform into this kind of dual, tag where you have the first place, which is prod, which is the context, and then database, which is the, let's say, the tag by itself. You could use it to contextualize with environment like production, devel, but if you scroll down a bit, you can also see that you can contextualize it with a customer. For example, customer one will be database for this customer, but could be web for this customer, and so on and so on. So this is pretty useful to, let's say, provide context for your labels and tags. So that's already available. It's pretty simple. Just put an equal sign between the two values, and that will do the context for you that you want. So let's switch to the Misc section. So as you can see, it's still already many improvement, but the Misc section tends to, let's say, merge everything that is not big enough to be a huge feature. But if you start to add all of them, it means that it's still a pretty nice release. So the first step is in this mix section. The first paragraph is related to the using of forward headers, and it's really useful if you are using Xen Orchestra behind a reverse proxy, for example, Nginx, HA proxy, whatever. So if you do that, you won't be able to get the IP address of the end user, the people that is, actually accessing your Xen Orchestra through the proxy. So for that, you have to enable something in the configuration. It wasn't possible before, so we added that feature. So it means now, if you have HA proxy, Nginx, or whatever in front of your Xen Orchestra, you will be able to get the IP address of the visitor of the website, which is important, or really important, for audits questions, security questions, and so on, to authenticate, to be sure at least that people visiting the thing could be logged correctly, and not just people everyone coming from the proxy. So that's pretty handy. And I mean, it's just not for security, but audit reasons and so on. So a simple configuration key to add in your configuration file, and that's it. Let's move to the SAML improvement we made. So as you may or may not know, SAML is a security assertion markup language. So in short, it allows you to connect to Xen Orchestra through a single sign-on portal or something like this. It's a kind of the ancestor of OpenID, I would say. It's a bit more complex in XML, but still pretty resilient and secure. And we've been asked to add in our, let's say, plugin that allows you to connect with SAML let's say, an option that it's called forced reauthentication. And so basically this means even if you have a valid token with a single sign-on platform like the SAML one, then Xen Orchestra will ask the SSO provider to re-authenticate you despite you already have a valid token. So why? The reason is mostly security, because Xen Orchestra could be considered, and as a good reason, as a really sensitive piece of software, and you don't want to have anybody having access to it. So it's a kind of second layer on your single sign-on security, meaning that even if you have a valid token, someone, I don't know, have physical access to your physical machine, and get your browser and access to Xen Orchestra, then on it, the user will have to relog as soon as it opens the new tab and connect to Xen Orchestra. So this is a defense in depth protection for this kind of sensitive access, which Xen Orchestra is obviously as being connected to all your hosts. Let's switch to the feature of changing memory while it's running. So it's not really a new feature inside XCP-ng. It's more a way to conveniently change the memory of a VM. So as you may know, there's two kind of memory things that you can change in XCP-ng VM. The first one is dynamic memory that you could change live while the VM is running, and the other is static memory, which is, let's say, the dynamic could move into that static range, but you can't change that static range while the VM is running. So before this feature, what you have is you have to do was to shut down the VM, change the memory, then start the VM. Now, if you want to change the value in the static range, it will detect it automatically and tells you, okay, so what we can do for you is click on reboot, for example. This will shut down the VM, change the memory, and then start the VM for you. So we reduce the, let's say, clutter of doing that with at least 6-7 clicks to be able to get that result into only 2 clicks. So it's going faster, and if you are okay to reboot the VM, there's modal warning telling you that it will reboot, but still you can go faster to change the static settings, even if the VM is running, by doing this shutdown, change, start automatically for you. And the other feature that we improve is unrelated to the UI this time. It's related to XOCLI, because we had user reporting or forgetting to register your CLI to your server, XO server part. And when you do that, for example, you just start XOCLI with a command and you forgot to register, then you will have this invalid URL error, which is kind of, not trivial to understand. So that's why we decided to put a better message. And so you will have the please use register first before starting to send commands. It might be a small thing, but I mean, it was in terms of development, but in terms of, quality of life, it's pretty important, because you start to understand exactly what's the problem, instead of having to go on the forum, ask a question, or seek on Google, whatever, and so on. So that's why I think this kind of quality of life improvements are really important. Let's move on to the REST API right now. So not a lot of change in this release for the REST API, but still some reorganization, like following the best practices on how to build a REST API, how to name things, and so on. And I would, since we didn't want to break anything, as if you are already using some path, we just have redirection. So, for example, backups is being renamed as backup without an S on the end, which is more logical because of the type of the object, which is a backup. But still, anyway, now you have some slight changes, but also we expose more backup jobs that we didn't expose before into the REST API. So I think right now we have all the backup type that you could create in Xen Orchestra that are available to get the information on them in the Exos REST API. Then let's talk about some feature we develop in Xen Orchestra, but that are only available if you are using XCP-ng 8.3, which is not yet available. However, a new ISO with a beta 2 is coming very soon in January, and with the new updates that are already available if you are using XCP-ng 8.3, if you just do a yum update, you will end up to be in the beta 2, in fact. So anyway, more news on that next month. So for this XCP-ng 8.3, you could show in edit IPv6 for your physical interfaces, the PIF. So why? Because obviously this is new. IPv6 support for the DOM0, for the host, if you like, is now available for 8.3, and we had to obviously get the UI up to date to make those changes. So that's what we do in the UI of Xen Orchestra this month. And it's not the only thing. The next other feature that we added, which is really cool, frankly, is the enhanced coalesce detection. So in 8.3, we introduce, well, to be fair, some Zen server developers introduce a task that you could track directly in the Zappy task about when a coalesce is happening in the storage stack. So, for example, you remove a snapshot, then a coalesce will happen, and we manage in Xen Orchestra to guess when it should happen, because when there's a snapshot we move, the chain got only one child, and then it means this coalesce should occur. So we already have in a health view the capability to display how many coalesce disks left. But then with the test, you could actually track the progress on what's going on regarding the coalesce. So there's a task visible, but also in each SR, like last month, we started to display the task that Coalesce is running for this storage repository. But now, even in the SR view, the overall one, you'll have a small cog displayed to each SR, which is actually doing a Coalesce, which is pretty easy to spot. So, and if you hover on the cog, you will see the message. So this provides you a better overview on what's going on your storage. And let's finish with Lite. So it's a kind of a big milestone for Lite, because what we wanted to achieve before the end of the year was kind of a first version that will be at least provide exactly all the information you had in the basic default page you had before. And the default page you had before was able to deploy Xen Orchestra. That was something really missing in Lite. So that's what we did. So now you could quick deploy Xen Orchestra appliance directly from Lite, and it's pretty nice. It uses the right theme for, you have a white or dark theme. It's pretty easy. It's, the UI is nice. So now you just install your host, you go to Lite, you could deploy Xen Orchestra, and that's it. So this is an important milestone in Xen Orchestra Lite. And also VM creation will come, let's say, first quarter or next year. So you might be able to do all the basic tasks in Xen Orchestra. That will be our first, let's say, final release somehow. Obviously, it will be improved, but this will be, I think, a real milestone. So the first one is done yet, and we are eager to get the next one early next year. So two other improvements in Exolite. The first one is giving the number of running VMs in the tree view. So if you collapse the view, you don't know how many VMs you have. Now we got some, a pill with a number into it, and it's a number of VM running. So if you hover on that pill, you know that number means VMs running. So even if you are in kind of compact mode where all your hosts are closed, then you could have an idea on how many VMs are running into each host, which is really convenient. And last, it's could be seen as a minor thing. It's a better status panel component, but again, it's an important thing that for each view into Exolite, you have a properly centered displayed information. So that's why I think it's pretty important. So it's a wrap. I think I did an overview on everything new for this Xen Orchestra 5.90 release. I hope you like it. And again, even if just after Merry Christmas, just a few days late, and Happy New Year, and eager to see you in 2024 for really, really exciting stuff coming. So see you soon, and bye-bye.